So let's play a game. There's a car with over 1,000 horsepower, a 233 mile an hour top speed, and a 0 to 60 time of just 2.3 seconds. What car is this?
Could it be...
If you can't say ZR1, what car is this?
It's got to be some crazy supercar like a Rimac Navara or something.
Exactly. There's no world where that answer is a Corvette, except for this one. Hypercars are supposed to be untouchable, the realm of 7-figure price tags, prestigious badges, and exclusivity. But this isn't just another Corvette we're talking about. This is the ZR1.
Wait. Is that what you're doing here? Are you making the argument that the ZR1 is a hypercar?
Bear with me. It's not here just to compete, it's here to end the competition. From its front engine legacy to its mid-engine configuration, the C8 was a massive leap. We've talked about that at length. We've talked about the Z06 and what that did, and I just want to break it down so you understand kind of where we're going with this. The C8 took on top-tier sports cars, bottom-tier supercars. The Z06 proved, as we stated with the call from Porsche, that the Corvette could compete on an international stage against supercars. Then they put out the ZR1, which is over 1,000 horsepower without the use of hybrid motors, and that is targeted to the hypercar market. It's a leap that no one thought Chevrolet could make, and I'm going to make the case for how they've managed to do it.
Why would they want to target hypercar manufacturers? Like, nobody's driving those things but Saudi princes.
Here's the question. I think Corvette's asking this question, and I'm asking this question. Can you compete in a world where prestige, badges, and hype reign supreme? Is pure performance enough for a hypercar?
I think it really depends on the driver. What do you think?
I think it is. I think it is. Look, when we were growing up, hypercar used to mean something. It was this new term that got thrown around. Where did it come from, right? You had sports cars. After you had sports cars, you had supercars. It's a car that's super, above that. It's the top of the echelon. But then you started seeing cars that couldn't be described by the term supercar anymore, and you were like, that's gotta be something else. And that's what this is. This is something else. This can't be described by just the supercar terminology. It's got over 1,000 horsepower. It does over 200 miles an hour comfortably. That's not a supercar anymore. It's definitely a hypercar.
But it doesn't have any crazy hybrid technology. It doesn't have a price tag over $1 million. It's not any sort of like crazy limited production run. Like, how can you keep it in the same conversation as like cars like that?
First of all, it's got an expected price of around $200,000. This is essentially a quarter of the price of some of its rivals. Now, let me break that down for you. The Lamborghini Revuelto is $600,000 and above, and well above, once you option that thing out in a way that's what you actually want to drive. It has 1,000 horsepower and does 217 miles an hour. Gets beat on both of those. The Ferrari SF90 Stradale is 625,000 and above, and well above, with 986 horsepower and a 211 mile an hour top speed. Beats both of those cars. When the SF90 came out, you had the F8, you have the 488, you're like, oh, that's just way out there. $1 million hypercar, I can't even imagine getting my hands on that.
Yeah.
That's not the landscape anymore. But let me keep going. A McLaren 6.5 LT, $375,000 with 755 horsepower and 205 top speed. Blows the doors off that thing. 911 GT2 RS, 300 grand, cheaper, obviously, in true Porsche fashion. 700 horsepower, 211 mile an hour top speed. Blows the doors off that. It's blowing the doors off all of the giants. This isn't entry-level cars. This is the top of the top for all these brands. It's beating them at every game.
Okay, so if it's beating them at on-paper performance and obviously a lot by price, like what about like on the track? Like, isn't the main point of a lot of these hypercars that they put down crazy track numbers?
And that's what this car is going to do better than anyone. And you're going to see when they give this thing a Nuremberg time, but you already know that it's a Z06 essentially.
Yeah.
The Z06 is fantastic on the track. This is just that dialed up with more horsepower, with more of an edge, and it's going to perform better on the track than any of these cars.
Wow, dude, that's a hot take.
We want to pick these extremely prestigious, very famous tracks. We're not shying away from the fact that the race cars have been there and people know those lap times.
Where this ranks both from a personal and a professional standpoint, it's second to none.
Mission accomplished. These are obscenely big gaps that we just threw down on every track we picked.
We got to refocus this conversation. The C8 was meant to do something. It was meant to prove that the next gen of Corvette was not going to be limited by technologies like front engine configurations, and they were going to be a great car at a great price point. The Z06 proved they were a supercar. They could compete in that range. And what I'm trying to show clearly is their ambition. They're not playing catch up anymore. They're not trying to compete. They're actually trying to end the conversation. They're trying to say that Corvette is the best, not a competitor, but is the best. The Zora's not out yet, but at every single price point, they're coming in and they're doing it at a cheaper price, and they're beating everyone.
Yeah, if they come out ahead of cars that cost literally double, if not more, in track numbers and performance figures, in every conceivable metric that you would care about in driving this car, then it really does kind of reframe the discussion and forces those car companies to recognize themselves not so much for their performance, but rather just for exclusivity.
And that's the conversation that I want to broach. It's like, as you think about what the ZR1 is doing, actually just think about it. It's a Corvette. People are like, oh, it's just Corvette. It could never, it's blowing the socks off of an SF90 and a Revuelto in every single way. How much of a hypercar is just a badge? If a hypercar is going to become just a badge, because it never was. It was always about performance figures. It was always about high horsepower. It was always about doing things that supercars couldn't do. If it's just about a badge, and after this, if competing with this car is not even worth it, and now you got to go Pagani Zonda route and just make your thing so visceral and crazy because you can't compete with cars like this on performance numbers, then this thing's redefining what a hypercar means.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's this whole aspect of hypercars that are about like the fine-tune engineering and the craftsmanship and something like that, but how can you even use the craftsmanship as a virtue signal if we know most of the interiors of these cars, especially the Pagani and the McLaren, are absolute junk? Like, it's like you're sitting in the air fryer.
The McLarens are tough. The Zonda is it's beautiful. You can't say it's not beautiful.
Yeah.
It's not very usable.
Yeah.
That's a good way to say it.
It's very utilitarian, but
Yeah.
people are pointing to these things as being engineering perfection, and the reason that it's mostly functional is because of this thing's ridiculous performance.
Yeah.
But if you take that away from it,
The car is ridiculous in a number of different ways.
Yeah.
And the reason why it doesn't have cup holders and heated and cooled seats is because it's got performance that can't be matched.
yeah.
Now that can be matched. And this thing's got heated and cooled seats, and it's got cup holders, and it's got trunks that close themselves. This is a hypercar, and it's crazy to say. I know that it doesn't have the badge. We played that game at the beginning because if this car had any other badge on it, it would fit right in.
All right, you're kind of selling me. I'm not gonna lie, you're kind of selling me, but I'm not completely there yet. Why should this thing be considered in the same conversation as like a Koenigsegg Agera, which is like just a work of art?
Well, again, I'm not trying to make that point, and I want to be clear about that. It's time that we start drawing a separation. There's hypercars that are art, and there's hypercars that are not. And so if you want a 1969 Mustang in immaculate condition, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you that a new GT is better. Because what you're buying is a piece of art on the road. And you can still do that for Koenigsegg, and you can still do that for Ferrari and Lamborghini, but to say that you're buying the pinnacle of engineering and a driving experience that can't be matched is dying. It's literally dying. And it was one thing when they did it with the C8. It was another thing when they did it with the Z06. But now that they're doing it for their kings, like this is the top. No matter what, when the Z06 came out and competed against a 488 or an F8, you were like, yeah, but okay, well, they've got, the Aventador, or they've got the SF90. Now they're coming for that. And they haven't matched it, they've beat it. And when the Zonda comes out, that's going to be coming for the Koenigsegg and for the Pagani. And no one in the automotive world is safe. Like, at all. No one's safe. And they're doing it all with the chassis that costs 60 grand. It's crazy.
Yeah, that is absolutely nuts. I mean, it does get hard to justify still seeing those amazing like works of art, like those hypercars, like the Zonda and the Huayra, as impressive as we've seen them previously if their performance doesn't blow everything else out of the water. It kind of like pulls the rug out from underneath that entire like perception.
Yes, precisely. That's what I'm trying to say. You've got carbon tubs, you've got seats that don't move, you've got plastic that looks like you're in a Covenant Halo vehicle, and the explanation for that is in pursuit of performance, and it's not true. The facade is faded.
They're gonna say that like you're in a Corvette. They're just gonna use that as a criticism, but at the end of the day, if you actually try to lean on performance, you can. And that's something really valuable to take away from those manufacturers.
And so let me ask you this, and I want you to actually think about this for a second. What excuse do they still have to put their next car out? The next car they put out, what excuse do they have to be beat by a $200,000 Corvette ZR1? What are they gonna say?
What they're gonna try to do is they're gonna try to have track times. And they're gonna say this is for real race car drivers.
It'll lose on the track.
If it still loses on the track, it's gonna be tough, man. They're just gonna have to ignore it.
The SF90 Ferrari had a Nürburgring time of 6:57. The Mustang GTD had a Nürburgring time of 6:57.
Yeah.
And so you've got a $300,000 plus Mustang tying an SF90 Stradalia, and then, like, it's on the track. That's crazy. But everyone knows the ZR1 is going to beat the GTD on the track.
Do we?
No, we do. It has 200 plus additional horsepower. Yeah. It's faster in every single metric, and it's going to be more of a track beast. The reason why the Z06 didn't put down the time we expected or as close is just because it's outgunned on power and the gear ratio kind of sucks. But this car is going to fix those problems and overpower it, and it's gonna put down a better time.
Let's see, because I actually feel like the GTD came out in the middle of like the Corvette's production cycle, right around the time that they were already going to announce the ZR1, and they had already locked in the engineering for that car, and then kind of out of nowhere the GTD came out with its announcement. So I feel like there's a chance that they might have to go back to the drawing board if they intend on beating it.
I don't think so at all. I think the ZR1, and I think you can look at it and see pretty clearly, it's going to beat the GTD on the track, and it's going to do so at $150,000 less than the GTD costs, and it's going to do so at a fraction of the cost of its Ferrari and Lamborghini counterparts. I just want to again just draw this out so it's very, very clear. When a Corvette C8 comes out and beats a 911 or other competitors at $20,000 to $30,000 less, it's like, okay, well, it doesn't have a badge. When a Z06 comes out and it beats cars that are double the price, it's like, okay, well, that's a little harder to defend, but it doesn't have a badge.
Yeah.
When it comes out and beats cars at a quarter of the price, when will it end? When will it end? Does it need to be $5 for you to finally give it the respect that it deserves? Like,
it needs to beat the Boeing 747 off the line.
Yeah, and it probably does. Boeings take off at 150 to 180. This thing's putting down 233, and people still aren't giving the respect it deserves.
This guy said that the ZR1's gonna beat the Boeing.
ZR1s aren't having doors blown off of it.
We'll see what happens at 215 miles an hour.
It might have doors blown off of it.
There's gonna be some maniac that has like a convertible spec one. It's just gonna put it down.
Don't even get me started on the usability of this car. Actually, get me started on the usability of this car. We talked about this really quickly, but the hypercars are not usable. They're pieces of art for the road, and you have to sacrifice usability for performance. Let's talk about some of the things the ZR1 brings to the hypercar space that you are not used to seeing. We talked about cup holders. We talked about a trunk that self-closes. We talked about heated and cooled seats. What about a hardtop convertible? What about a super comfortable hardtop convertible? You don't have to be in some monocoque pit where everyone's like, no, it's for structural rigidity so it can go super fast. No, you get to put the top down and enjoy a nice sunny day in your hypercar.
Yeah, when we were at the that Miami show with like all the Paganis and stuff, we saw the dude holding the removable roof of the Pagani, and it was like walking around with like a literal like Fabergé egg. Dude was like had it wrapped in multiple layers of bubble wrap and microfiber towels, just gently trying to like locate it and move it somewhere safe where it could not be damaged.
How about you have a car that can put down the most impressive track times you've ever seen, top speeds well over 200 miles an hour, absolute monster. And then when something breaks, you just hit up Chevy and fix it. You just buy your own parts for a fraction of the, I don't even know how much a Ferrari SF90 splitter would be. This isn't a story about Corvette competing. That was the story. This is the story about Corvette winning, and winning definitively.
What would you like to see change? Like, are you happy with Corvette winning, or what result do you want?
I think that we need to stop giving companies passes. I've said that so many times. I'm not saying that because I hate Porsche. I'm not saying that because I hate BMW. I'm not saying that because I hate Mercedes. I'm just saying, and that's at the Z06 price point, C8 price point. At this price point, it's Lamborghini, McLaren, and Ferrari. But the point is, by giving these companies passes and saying, oh, well, you can never be in the same conversation with the craftsmanship and workmanship, what you're doing is you're allowing these companies to keep serving you crap. That's what you're doing. You're not pressuring them to say, no, I'm not going to buy that car anymore. If you want my dollars, you're going to have to come out with something that's better than this. I can't have my buddies in Corvettes beating me off the line.
Yeah. If
I just paid $500, $600, $700, $800,000 for this car, I look like a goofball. And that's one thing that Lamborghini and Ferrari owners do not want. They don't want to look like a goofball.
They cannot. Not for that much money.
Not for that much money. To tie it all together, like, the ZR1 isn't just a car. It isn't just a well-performing car. It's a declaration from GM. It's a declaration from Corvette that performance and value can actually coexist in the hypercar realm. You've never thought that before. You've always heard hypercar, and you've always thought to yourself, man, maybe one day in my wildest dreams, when I make millions and millions and millions of dollars, you never thought that could be a reality. On a well-paid salary, but not multiple millions of dollars, you could afford a car with this kind of performance.
And maybe you shouldn't be allowed to. I mean, that raises a safety question.
Yeah, there's another question for that, no doubt. But yeah, the Corvette isn't aiming to be a rival anymore. It wants to lead every segment. This is their big move. The C8, the Z06, and now the ZR1. It didn't just rewrite the rules, it threw them out entirely. And whether the world likes it or not, hypercars will never be the same.
These next few years are going to be nutty.
The world's getting taken over by Chevrolet and by Corvette. You're seeing that here live.
You heard it here first, folks.
And with that said, thanks for watching.